Have you ever sat down full of motivation, opened a spreadsheet or a budgeting app and thought, this time I've got it? You tell yourself you'll track every expense, follow the categories, stick to the plan. And for a week, maybe two, you actually do. Then life happens. A late dinner because work ran long. A birthday you forgot was coming up. A month where everything feels just a little more expensive than it should be. And suddenly, the budget is abandoned. Not because you're reckless, not because you don't care, but because something inside you quietly decided this was too exhausting to keep up. If that sounds familiar, I want you to hear this clearly. The problem isn't that you're bad with money. The problem is that most budgeting systems were never designed for how adults actually live, feel, and make decisions. We're told budgeting is simple. Just spend less than you earn. Track your expenses. Be disciplined. If it doesn't work, the implication is subtle but heavy. You must be doing something wrong. You're not trying hard enough. You're not committed enough. But think about that for a second. If budgeting really worked the way it's presented, why do so many capable, intelligent adults struggle with it? Why do people who succeed at demanding jobs, manage families, and solve complex problems feel defeated by a list of numbers? It's not a personal failure, it's a design flaw. Traditional budgeting assumes we're calm, rational, consistent decision makers, that will value long-term goals more than short-term relief, that emotions won't interfere, that stress won't change how we behave. But adults don't live in a controlled environment. We live in a world where money decisions are made when we're tired, overwhelmed, hungry, anxious, or trying to keep peace at home. Any system that ignores that reality isn't just incomplete, it's unrealistic. Most budgets are built on a simple idea. If you become aware of where your money goes, you'll naturally adjust your behavior. Awareness equals control. The problem is that awareness doesn't automatically change behavior. Psychology shows us that knowing what we should do rarely overrides how we feel in the moment. You can know exactly how much is in your checking account and still order takeout because today was too much. Money isn't just math, it's emotional regulation. Think about the last time you spent money you hadn't planned to. Chances are, it wasn't random. Maybe you were exhausted and needed convenience. Maybe you were stressed and wanted relief. Maybe you felt behind in life and wanted a small sense of progress or comfort. Budgeting systems don't account for this. They treat spending like a moral choice instead of a coping mechanism. When you overspend, the budget doesn't ask why. It just tells you that you failed. Another issue is that traditional budgets are rigid in a world that isn't. Your rent might be predictable, but everything else isn't. Food prices change. Social obligations pop up. Work stress fluctuates. Energy levels rise and fall. A budget that expects the same behavior every month assumes your life stays emotionally flat. It doesn't. There's also the issue of time scarcity. After a full day of work, family responsibilities, and mental load, budgeting feels like more labor. Not productive labor, emotional labor. Reviewing transactions can feel like reliving stress instead of solving it. So the brain does what it's wired to do. It avoids pain. And then there's shame. Budgets quietly create a scoreboard. Good month, bad month, on track, off track. Over time, many people stop checking their numbers, not because they don't care, but because checking makes them feel like they're failing at adulthood. Once shame enters the picture, behavior changes. People avoid looking, they disengage. They spend impulsively because they already feel behind. The budget, meant to create clarity, becomes a source of anxiety. Here's something rarely talked about. Most financial advice assumes your only job is to optimize money. But real life forces trade-offs. You might spend more on groceries because you don't have time to cook. You might spend on convenience because your energy is already spent somewhere else. You might say yes to social plans because saying no feels like another loss in a long week. None of these decisions are irrational, they're human. But budgets don't adapt to trade-offs. They don't say, this month was heavier, so we'll adjust. They say, you broke the rules. Over time, this creates a quiet internal conflict. On one side, you want financial stability. On the other, you want a life that doesn't feel like constant deprivation. When budgeting frames those two desires as opposites, something has to give. Usually, it's the budget. The shift happens when you stop seeing budgeting as control and start seeing it as alignment. Instead of asking, how do I force myself to stick to this plan? The question becomes, how does my money support the kind of life I'm actually living right now? That's a subtle change, but it's powerful. Because now, the goal isn't perfection, it's awareness without punishment, flexibility without chaos. When you accept that emotions will influence spending, you can design around that instead of fighting it. You can expect that some months will be messier. You can build in margin not just for emergencies, but for being human. This mindset changes decisions. Instead of feeling guilty for spending on convenience, you ask whether it's buying you time, energy, or peace. Instead of cutting everything that brings joy, you choose intentionally what stays and what goes. Money becomes less about restriction and more about reducing friction in your life. People who succeed with money long-term usually aren't the most disciplined. They're the most honest with themselves. They don't track every dollar forever. They simplify. They automate what matters. They focus on a few big decisions instead of obsessing over small ones. They understand that consistency beats intensity, that a budget you can follow imperfectly for years is better than a perfect system you abandon after 2 months. They also separate self-worth from financial performance. A bad month doesn't mean they're bad with money. It means they had a bad month. That distinction matters more than most advice admits. If budgeting has failed you before, start smaller than you think you should, not because you're incapable, but because your life is full. Instead of tracking everything, focus on awareness in one area that causes the most stress. Maybe it's eating out, maybe it's subscriptions, maybe it's impulsive online spending late at night. Awareness in one place builds momentum without overwhelm. Give yourself ranges instead of exact numbers. Life doesn't fit neatly into categories, and your money doesn't have to either. Plan for imperfection. Literally expect that you'll go off plan sometimes. When that happens, the goal isn't to quit. It's to reset without judgment. And most importantly, tie money decisions to what you value emotionally, not what you think you should value. If your spending supports rest, health, connection, or peace of mind, it's not wasted. It's aligned. Budgeting doesn't fail because adults are irresponsible. It fails because it ignores how responsibility actually feels in real life. Money is emotional. It's tied to stress, identity, time, and security. When we pretend it's just math, we set ourselves up for frustration. You don't need more discipline. You need a system that respects your humanity. One that allows room for bad days, unexpected months, and slow progress. Financial peace isn't built through perfection. It's built through understanding yourself a little better each month. Adjusting, learning, continuing. If you've struggled with budgeting, that doesn't mean you're behind. It means you're human, and progress, even quiet progress, always beats giving up.